She thought being invisible would keep her safe, until the most dangerous man in Portland saw her, truly saw her, and decided she was worth everything. But when he dropped to one knee in front of 300 people and asked her to marry him, it wasn't romance. It was war, because her ex-husband was in that room, and what happened next would either destroy her or prove she was never the forgettable woman they all believed she was. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The bookstore smelled like old paper and cinnamon tea, a scent Isabella Chen had carefully curated to make people feel safe. She needed them to feel safe because she couldn't. Not anymore. She stood behind the register of Chapter and Verse, her bookstore in Portland's Pearl District, rearranging a stack of bookmarks for the third time that morning. Her hands moved in small, apologetic motions, the kind of movements designed to take up as little space as possible. A customer brushed past her to reach the mystery section, and Isabella instinctively stepped back, murmuring sorry, even though she hadn't been in the way. She was 34 years old and had perfected the art of disappearing. It hadn't always been this way. 6 months ago, she'd still believed she could be seen without being destroyed. Then came the divorce hearing. The one where Trevor, her ex-husband of 8 years, had sat across a courtroom and called her boring, in front of a judge, 2 lawyers, and a court reporter who'd looked at Isabella with something like pity. "She's forgettable," Trevor had said, his voice steady, clinical. "I spent 8 years trying to make something interesting out of her. But you can't build a life with someone who's afraid of living." The judge had frowned. Trevor's lawyer had coughed. And Isabella had sat there, frozen, her hands folded in her lap like a good girl, like someone who knew better than to argue with the truth. She'd left that courtroom with her divorce decree and a single burning belief. If she could just be smaller, quieter, less, maybe no one would ever hurt her like that again. Now she wore neutral colors, grays, beiges, soft browns that blended into the bookstore's walls. She cut her hair short and practical. She smiled at customers, but never too much, never in a way that invited conversation beyond, "Can I help you find something?" The bell above the door chimed. Isabella looked up, reflexive, then back down at the bookmarks. A young girl, maybe 9, wandered toward the children's section, her mother trailing behind. Isabella allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Kids were safe. Kids didn't judge. "Excuse me." The little girl approached the counter, clutching a worn copy of The Secret Garden. "Is this a good one?" Isabella crouched down, meeting the girl's eyes. "It's one of the best. It's about a girl who finds a hidden place where she can grow into who she's meant to be." The girl's face lit up. "I'll take it." As Isabella rang up the purchase, her hands steady for the first time all morning, she felt a flicker of something almost like peace. This small exchange, this quiet moment, was enough. It had to be. What does it take for someone to believe they deserve to be invisible? Drop your thoughts below. Across town, Dante Caruso stood on the balcony of the Columbia Tower Ballroom, looking down at 300 people who would never meet his eyes. The charity gala, some cause for children's hospitals, he'd forgotten which, was the kind of event where Portland's elite gathered to feel good about themselves. Dante was there because his presence was expected. The Caruso family didn't make requests. They made appearances, and people adjusted accordingly. He wore a black suit tailored so precisely it looked like a weapon. His dark hair was brushed back, revealing a face that could have been handsome if it weren't so carefully controlled. He was 42 years old, and he'd learned long ago that power wasn't about being liked. It was about being inevitable. His phone buzzed. Dante glanced at the screen. A text from Marco, his second-in-command, "Shipment cleared. No complications." He typed back, "Good." Then he pocketed the phone and returned his attention to the crowd below. A woman in a silver dress laughed too loudly at a joke from a city councilman. A tech mogul Dante had helped relocate. A business rival for last year raised a glass in his direction, nervous. Dante didn't acknowledge it. Acknowledgement implied equality. "Mr. Caruso." A voice at his elbow. Some foundation director, eager and desperate. "We're so grateful for your family's contribution. The children's wing will be." "You're welcome." Dante's voice was polite, final. The director took the hint and retreated. Dante hated these events. They were theater, and he'd stopped believing in performances after Lucia died. Lucia, his younger sister. The one person who'd ever seen past the carefully constructed walls and loved him anyway. She'd married a man Dante had warned her about. Charming, controlling, the kind of man who isolated her slowly until she believed she deserved it. By the time Dante realized how bad it had gotten, it was too late. Her husband had killed her in a rage, then himself, and Dante had been left with a fury so consuming it had reshaped his entire operation. Now, no man in his territory touched a woman without consequences. Dante's people knew. Domestic cases weren't just business. They were personal. He checked his watch. Another hour, maybe two, before he could leave without causing offense. He scanned the room below, cataloging faces, alliances, threats. And then, on a whim he didn't examine too closely, Dante decided he was done. He texted Marco, leaving early. "Don't wait up." Marco's reply was immediate. "Where are you going?" Dante didn't answer. He didn't know yet. He took the elevator down, bypassed the valet, and walked. Portland in October was cool, misty, the kind of weather that made everything feel slightly unreal. Dante walked without direction, hands in his pockets, until he found himself in the Pearl District. A bookstore caught his eye. Warm light spilling onto the sidewalk, a handwritten sign in the window, "Open late." "Come in." Dante didn't read. He barely had time to sleep. But something about the invitation, simple, earnest, made him reach for the door. The bell chimed as he stepped inside. The store was small, crowded with shelves that reached the ceiling. It smelled like tea and old pages. A woman stood behind the counter, her back to him, shelving books with careful, precise movements. "I'll be right with you," she said without turning around. Her voice was soft, apologetic even in welcome. Dante said nothing. He moved deeper into the store, scanning titles he didn't care about, aware that he was stalling. Aware that, for reasons he couldn't name, he didn't want to leave yet. Behind him, the bell chimed again. And then he heard it, a voicemail laced with contempt. Well, still hiding in here, Isabella?" Dante turned. The woman behind the counter, Isabella, had gone rigid. A man stood in the doorway, tall, expensive suit, arm around a younger woman whose smile didn't reach her eyes. Isabella's face had drained of color. And Dante, who controlled everything in his world, felt something shift. The air in the bookstore changed the moment Trevor stepped inside. Isabella felt it first. A tightening in her chest, a familiar dread that made her want to fold into herself. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white against the dark wood, and forced herself to breathe. "Trevor." Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. She hated that. Hated how easily he could reduce her to this trembling, apologetic version of herself. Trevor smiled, the kind of smile that looked warm from a distance but turned cold up close. "Isabella, you look exactly the same." He said it like a diagnosis, like disappointment wrapped in pity. The woman on his arm, blonde, mid-20s, wearing a ring that caught the light, shifted uncomfortably. "Trev, maybe we should." "It's fine, babe." Trevor's hand tightened on her waist, possessive. "This is my ex-wife. The one I told you about." Isabella's stomach dropped. She knew what he'd told this woman. The same things he'd told the courtroom, the mediator, anyone who would listen. That Isabella was boring, suffocating, unable to keep up with his ambitions. She wanted to disappear. Wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. Instead, she straightened her spine barely and managed, "Can I help you find something or—" "God, no." Trevor laughed, sharp and mean. "I'm just showing Amber around the neighborhood. She's moving in with me next month." Wanted her to see all the local establishments. His eyes swept the bookstore with thinly veiled disdain. "Though I told her, this place won't last another year. No real vision, you know?" Amber's face flushed. "Trevor, that's honest." Trevor stepped closer to the counter, and Isabella instinctively stepped back. "Come on, Is. You know I'm right. This little hideaway of yours." He gestured vaguely at the shelves, the reading nook, the carefully chosen books. "It's just like you. Safe. Small. Forgettable." There it was. That word. The one that had echoed in her head every day for 6 months. Forgettable. Isabella's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to let him see her cry. "I think you should leave." "Why?" Trevor leaned against the counter, casual, like they were old friends catching up. "I'm a paying customer." Or, wait, are there even any other customers? He glanced around the empty store, eyebrows raised in mock concern. Yikes. Business that bad. Trevor, please. Amber tugged on his arm, her discomfort obvious now. Let's just go. But Trevor wasn't done. He never was. You know what your problem is, Isabella? You're still playing victim. Still acting like the world owes you something just because you're too scared to actually live. That's why I left. That's why. That's enough. The voice came from the back of the store, low, calm, laced with something that made the temperature drop 10 degrees. Isabella's head snapped up. She'd forgotten about the man who'd come in before Trevor. He'd been browsing near the classics section. A tall figure in an expensive black suit, so still she'd barely registered his presence. Now he was walking toward them, and everything about him screamed danger. He wasn't particularly tall, maybe 6 feet, but he moved like someone who'd never had to raise his voice to be heard. His dark eyes were fixed on Trevor with an intensity that made Isabella's breath catch. There was something predatory in the way he assessed the situation, calculated and cold. Trevor straightened, his bravado flickering. "Excuse me?" The man stopped beside Isabella, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. He didn't touch her, didn't look at her. His entire focus was on Trevor. "I said that's enough." His voice was quieter this time, but somehow more dangerous. "The lady asked you to leave." Trevor's face reddened. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who doesn't appreciate men who harass women in public." The man's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. A coiled readiness that made Amber take a step back. Trevor laughed, but it sounded forced. "Harass? I'm talking to my ex-wife. This is none of your business." "Then let me make it my business." The man reached into his pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a business card. He held it up so Trevor could read it. Isabella watched Trevor's face go from red to white in the span of a heartbeat. "You're Dante Caruso." Trevor's voice cracked on the name. "I am. Dante." So that was his name, pocketed the card. "And you are?" I'm nobody. I'm just..." Trevor was backing toward the door now, pulling Amber with him. "We were just leaving." "Good." Dante's eyes never left Trevor's face. "Before you go, let me be clear. This bookstore is under my family's protection now. If you come back, if you so much as walk past this block again, I'll take it personally. Do we understand each other?" Trevor nodded so fast Isabella thought his neck might snap. "Yes. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I didn't know she was." "She's none of your concern. Not anymore." Dante's voice dropped even lower. "Now get out." Trevor grabbed Amber's hand and practically ran for the door. The bell chimed violently as they left, and then there was silence. Isabella stood frozen behind the counter, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She stared at Dante Caruso, this stranger who'd just upended her entire night, and tried to form words. "Thank you" felt inadequate. "Who are you" felt dangerous. "Why did you do that" felt too vulnerable. Instead, what came out was, "You didn't have to do that." Dante finally looked at her. Really looked at her. His dark eyes swept across her face, not assessing, not judging, but seeing. Isabella felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with Trevor's cruelty, and everything to do with being visible to someone who actually paid attention. "Yes," Dante said quietly. "I did." Isabella's hands were shaking. She clasped them together, trying to hide it, but of course he noticed. He noticed everything. "He's your ex-husband?" Dante asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "How long?" "Divorced 6 months ago." The words felt like glass in her throat. "We were married for 8 years. Dante's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. "And he comes here often? To your store?" "No. First time since." Isabella stopped, unwilling to relive the courtroom again. "First time in a while. He won't come back." It wasn't a promise. It was a fact. Dante said it with the kind of certainty that came from a life where his words became reality simply because he spoke them. Isabella should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt something closer to panic. I don't need protection. I can handle." "Can you?" It wasn't cruel, the way he asked. Just honest. Direct. "Because from where I was standing, he was 2 minutes away from making you cry in your own store." Shame flooded through her, hot and immediate. "I'm fine." "You're shaking." "I said I'm fine." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, defensive. "I don't need you to swoop in and..." She gestured helplessly at the door, at him, at the entire situation. "I don't even know you." Dante Caruso. He extended his hand, formal, almost old-fashioned. Isabella stared at it. She knew that name. Everyone in Portland knew that name, even if they pretended not to. The Caruso family controlled half the city's underground operations. Not drugs, not trafficking, but everything else. Protection, gambling, enforcement. They were the kind of power that operated in shadows, making mayors and police chiefs nervous. And she'd just let one of them threaten her ex-husband on her behalf. I can't. Isabella's voice broke. I can't owe someone like you. Something flickered across Dante's face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. You don't owe me anything. People like you don't do things for free. People like me? His lips curved, almost a smile but not quite. What do you think I am, MS? Chun. Isabella Chun. She didn't take his hand. And I think you're dangerous. I am. No hesitation. No false modesty. But not to you. You don't know me. No. Dante lowered his hand, unbothered by her refusal. But I know men like him. And I know what they do to women like you if someone doesn't stop them. Women like you. The phrase hung in the air between them. Loaded with implications Isabella wasn't ready to unpack. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how thin her cardigan was, how cold the store had gotten. Why do you care? For the first time, Dante's carefully controlled expression shifted. Something raw flickered across his face, grief, maybe, or old anger that never fully healed. Because someone should have cared about my sister, he said quietly. And no one did. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward. Isabella felt them settle somewhere in her chest, heavy and true. She wanted to ask what happened to his sister. Wanted to understand why a man like Dante Caruso had walked into her bookstore on a random October night and decided she was worth defending. But before she could speak, Dante moved toward the door. I'll leave you alone now. But if he comes back, he won't. If he does, Dante continued, pulling a card from his wallet, call me. He placed the card on the counter between them, then selected a book from the nearest shelf without looking at the title. How much? What? The book. I said I'd buy one. Isabella glanced at the book in his hand. Pride and Prejudice, worn paperback, $8.95. You don't have to. How much? He repeated, patient but firm. $8.95. Dante handed her a 20. Keep the change. Isabella rang him up with trembling fingers, hyper-aware of his presence across the counter. When she handed him the book, their fingers brushed, barely, just for a second, and she felt the contact like an electric shock. Dante's eyes met hers one last time. Lock the door behind me, Isabella. Then he was gone, the bell chiming softly in his wake. Isabella stood alone in her bookstore, staring at the business card on the counter. Her heart was still racing. Her hands were still shaking. And for the first time in 6 months, she felt something other than shame. She felt seen. Isabella didn't sleep that night. She lay in her small apartment above the bookstore, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the moment Trevor walked in until Dante Caruso walked out. Her mind kept snagging on details she wished she could forget. The way Trevor's voice had dripped with contempt, the way Amber had looked at her with pity, the way she'd stood there, frozen, helpless, until a stranger intervened. A dangerous stranger. She rolled onto her side, pulling the blanket up to her chin. The business card sat on her nightstand, stark white against the dark wood. She'd brought it upstairs, even though she'd told herself she'd throw it away. Dante Caruso. Private consultant. There was a phone number. Nothing else. No company name, no address. Just those 2 words that meant everything and nothing. Private consultant. Right. That's what they called it when you ran half the city's underworld. Isabella closed her eyes, but all she could see was the look on Dante's face when he'd mentioned his sister. That flash of pain, quickly buried. Someone should have cared about my sister, and no one did. What had happened to her? Isabella shook her head, angry at herself. It didn't matter. Whatever tragedy had shaped Dante Caruso into the man he was today had nothing to do with her. He'd played hero for one night, and now it was over. She didn't need saving. She didn't need him. She'd been handling Trevor on her own for 6 months. She'd survived the divorce, survived rebuilding her life from scratch, survived the loneliness and the shame and the quiet, relentless belief that maybe Trevor had been right about her. She didn't need someone to swoop in and fix things. Especially not someone whose protection came with strings she couldn't afford to pull. By the time dawn broke, Isabella had made her decision. She got up, showered, dressed in her usual gray cardigan and jeans, and went downstairs to open the store. The card on her nightstand stayed where it was. At 9 a.m., she unlocked the front door, flipped the sign to open, and stepped behind the counter. The store looked exactly as it had yesterday. Shelves of books, the reading nook by the window, the smell of cinnamon tea brewing in the back. But something felt different. Isabella tried to focus on her morning routine. Checking inventory, updating the website, arranging the new releases on the front table. But her hands felt clumsy, her thoughts scattered. She kept glancing at the door, half expecting Trevor to walk back in. Or worse, expecting Dante. At 10:30, the bell chimed. Isabella's heart jumped. But it was just Mrs. Patterson, her regular customer who came in every Saturday for the new romance releases. Isabella exhaled, forced a smile, and helped the older woman find what she was looking for. "You look tired, dear," Mrs. Patterson said as Isabella rang up her books. "Just didn't sleep well," Isabella replied, keeping her voice light. "Well, take care of yourself." Mrs. Patterson patted her hand. "This place needs you." After she left, Isabella stood alone behind the counter, staring at nothing. This place needs you. Did it? Or was Trevor right? Was this just a hiding place? A way to avoid actually living? Isabella shook her head, annoyed at the direction of her thoughts. She grabbed her phone and pulled up her bank account, forcing herself to focus on something concrete. The numbers stared back at her, as grim as ever. The bookstore was barely breaking even. One more bad month, and she'd have to dip into her emergency fund. 2 more, and she'd be looking at closing. But she'd figure it out. She always did. She didn't need. The bell chimed again. Isabella looked up, and her breath caught. Dante Caruso stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. He shouldn't have come back. Dante knew at the moment he pushed open the door and saw Isabella's face. The way her eyes widened, the way her shoulders tensed, the way she looked at him like he was a problem she hadn't solved yet. He should have stayed away. Should have let last night be what it was. A one-time intervention, a moment of conscience, nothing more. But he'd spent the entire night thinking about her. About the way she'd stood behind that counter, trying so hard to be invisible while her ex-husband shredded her dignity. About the way her hands had shaken when she rang up his book. About the look in her eyes when she'd said, "I don't need protection." She'd been lying, but she'd also been telling the truth. Dante had run a background check on Trevor Chin at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, unable to let it go. What he'd found had made his blood run cold. Trevor Chin, 36, mid-level marketing executive at a tech firm downtown. Divorced. Engaged to a 25-year-old junior associate at his company. Financial records showed mounting credit card debt, 3 cars he couldn't afford, a condo with a mortgage he was 2 months behind on, and a pattern. Trevor's first girlfriend in college had filed a restraining order, later dropped. His second serious relationship had ended with the woman moving to California without notice. Isabella had been wife number 1. And now there was Amber, young and eager, and probably already starting to feel the slow tightening of his control. Trevor Chun was the kind of man who needed to feel powerful by making others feel small. Dante had seen it before, in the man who'd killed Lucia. He'd told himself that's why he couldn't let this go. Because of his sister, because of the promise he'd made at her funeral that no woman in his city would suffer like she had if he could stop it. But that was only part of the truth. The whole truth was simpler and more dangerous. He wanted to see Isabella again. So here he was, holding 2 cups of coffee like an idiot, about to push his way into the life of a woman who clearly didn't want him there. "Hi," he said. Isabella stared at him. "What are you doing here?" "Bringing you coffee." Dante held up one of the cups. "Black, no sugar." "Unless you take sugar?" "I should have asked." "I what?" She looked genuinely confused, which was almost charming. "Why would you bring me coffee?" "Because you looked like you could use it last night." Dante approached the counter slowly, giving her time to tell him to leave. She didn't. "And because I wanted to check on you." "I'm fine." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." But her voice was too defensive, too quick. She wasn't fine. She was rattled. Dante set both cups on the counter. "Humor me." Isabella looked at the coffee, then at him, then back at the coffee. "I can't accept this. It's coffee, not a marriage proposal." Her face flushed. "I know what it is. I also know that men like you don't do things without expecting something in return. Men like me." Dante smiled, but there was no humor in it. You said that last night too. And I meant it. Isabella crossed her arms, defensive. You're Dante Caruso. Everyone knows who you are. What you do. And what do I do, Isabella? She hesitated. I don't know exactly. But it's not legal. Some of it is. And the rest? Dante shrugged. The rest keeps people safe. Keeps order. Keeps men like your ex-husband from thinking they can do whatever they want without consequences. By threatening them? When necessary. Isabella's jaw tightened. I didn't ask you to threaten him. You didn't have to. That's the problem. Her voice rose, surprising both of them. She took a breath, steadying herself. You can't just walk into my life and start making decisions for me. I don't need you to fight my battles. I know you don't. Dante's voice was quiet, sincere. But that doesn't mean you should have to fight them alone. Something flickered across her face, vulnerability, quickly smothered. Why do you care? I told you. Your sister. I know. Isabella shook her head. But I'm not your sister. I'm not your responsibility. I'm nobody. The words hit Dante harder than they should have. I'm nobody. That's what Trevor had made her believe. That she was forgettable, insignificant, unworthy of protection or care or basic human decency. Dante leaned against the counter, holding her gaze. You're not nobody. You don't know me. Then let me. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with more meaning than Dante had intended. He saw Isabella process them, saw the fear and confusion and something else, something that looked almost like hope, cross her face. Then she shook her head. I think you should go. Dante straightened, nodded once. He'd pushed far enough. All right. He turned toward the door, then paused. The coffee's yours if you want it. And Isabella. She didn't respond, but he knew she was listening. If Trevor comes back, if he calls, texts, shows up, you need to tell someone. If not me, then the police. Men like him don't stop unless they're stopped. I can handle Trevor. Dante looked back at her. This woman who wore armor made of cardigans and politeness, who'd convinced herself that being small was the same as being safe. I hope you're right, he said quietly. Then he left, the bell chiming softly behind him. Isabella stood alone in her bookstore, staring at the 2 cups of coffee on the counter. She should throw them away. Should throw away his business card, lock her door, and forget Dante Caruso existed. Instead, she picked up one of the cups and took a sip. Black, no sugar. He'd guessed right. She hated that he'd guessed right. The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers and restocking, and trying not to think about dark eyes and quiet voices, and the way Dante had said you're not nobody like it was a fact instead of an opinion. By the time she closed the store at 8 p.m., Isabella was exhausted. She locked the front door, counted the register, and was heading upstairs when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her stomach tightened. She almost didn't answer, but something made her swipe to accept the call. Hello? Isabella Chin? A woman's voice, young, shaking. Yes. Who is this? My name is Amber. I was with Trevor last night. At your bookstore. Isabella's chest tightened. Is everything okay? A pause. Then quietly. No. I don't think it is. Isabella's hand tightened around her phone. Amber? What's wrong? There was a long pause, filled with the sound of shallow breathing. Then, he's scaring me. The words were soft, almost whispered, and they sent ice through Isabella's veins. She knew that tone. She'd used it herself once, years ago, when she'd called her mother and tried to explain why Trevor's jokes didn't feel funny anymore. Where are you? Isabella asked, keeping her voice calm. I'm in my car. Outside his condo. He told me to leave and Amber's voice cracked. I didn't know who else to call. I don't have family here, and my friends, they all think he's great, and I saw the way you looked at him last night. Like you knew. Like you understood. Isabella closed her eyes. She did understand. God, she understood too well. What happened? We got into a fight. About last night, actually. I told him it was cruel. What he said to you, and he got so angry. He said I was being dramatic, that you're just bitter about the divorce, that I was taking your side over his. Amber's breath hitched. Then he grabbed my arm. Not hard, but hard enough that I got scared. Really scared. Isabella's heart was pounding. Did he hurt you? No. I left before, but he kept texting me, apologizing, then blaming me, then apologizing again. And I don't know what to do. Tell her to run, Isabella thought. Tell her to pack a bag and never look back. But she knew it wasn't that simple. It had taken her 3 years to leave Trevor. 3 years of slowly realizing that the problem wasn't her inadequacy. It was his need to make her feel inadequate. Amber, listen to me, Isabella said carefully. You don't owe him anything. Not an explanation, not another chance, nothing. If you're scared, that's your body telling you something important. But what if I'm overreacting? What if? You're not. Isabella's voice was firm. Trust yourself. Please. Another pause. Then quieter. Will you talk to him? Just tell him to stop texting me. He might listen to you. Isabella's stomach dropped. Amber, I'm the last person he'll listen to. But that man last night, Dante, Trevor's terrified of him. If you ask Dante to. No. The word came out sharper than Isabella intended. I can't do that. Why not? Because I don't want to owe him. Because I'm trying to handle my own life. Because I'm scared of what it means that a man like Dante Caruso brought me coffee this morning. It's complicated, Isabella said instead. Amber was quiet for a moment. Then, okay, I understand. I'm sorry I bothered you. Amber, wait. But the line was already dead. Isabella stood in the middle of her bookstore, phone still pressed to her ear, feeling sick. She should call Amber back. Should do something. Instead, she climbed the stairs to her apartment, sat on the edge of her bed, and stared at Dante's business card. 3 days later, Isabella was arranging the window display when she heard the crash. The sound came from the front of the store. Sharp, violent, the unmistakable noise of breaking glass. Isabella spun around, heart in her throat, and saw it. The front window, spiderwebbed with cracks, a brick lying in the middle of the floor surrounded by glittering shards. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then she saw the note, wrapped around the brick with a rubber band. Her hands shook as she unwrapped it. As she read the words scrawled in handwriting she recognized. Stop turning people against me. Trevor. Isabella's vision blurred. The store, her sanctuary, had been violated. She looked around at the broken glass, the ruined display, the books scattered across the floor, and something inside her cracked open. She'd tried to handle this herself. Tried to be strong, independent, capable. And this was where it had gotten her. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and dialed 911. The police came. They took photos, filed a report, asked if she had security cameras. She didn't. Asked if she knew who might have done this. She said she had suspicions but no proof. They told her they'd increase patrols in the area. They told her to call if anything else happened. Then they left. Isabella stood in her ruined bookstore alone, staring at the broken window that would cost at least $2,000 to replace. Money she didn't have. She should cry. Should call her mother, or her friend Maya, or someone. Instead, she pulled Dante's business card from her wallet and dialed before she could talk herself out of it. He answered on the second ring. Isabella. Just her name. He didn't ask why she was calling or sound surprised. Like he'd been expecting this. My store was vandalized, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Someone threw a brick through my window. A pause. Then, deadly quiet. Trevor? I think so. There was a note. What did it say? Isabella read it to him. The silence on the other end of the line was somehow more frightening than any threat. When Dante spoke again, his voice was controlled, but she could hear the fury beneath it. Are you hurt? No. Are you safe right now? I think so. Lock your door. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Dante, you don't have to. Lock your door. The line went dead. Isabella did as she was told, flipping the deadbolt and the security latch, then sank down behind the counter, finally allowing herself to shake. Dante arrived in 8 minutes. Isabella heard the knock, firm, commanding, and looked through the window to see him standing on the sidewalk, his face dark with barely controlled rage. 2 men flanked him, both wearing suits, both looking like they could break someone in half without effort. She unlocked the door. Dante stepped inside, his eyes immediately scanning the destruction. The broken window, the scattered glass, the bricks still lying on the floor. Did you call the police? He asked. Isabella nodded. They left about 20 minutes ago. Did they say they'd do anything? They'll increase patrols. They took a report. Dante's jaw clenched. That's it. There's no proof it was Trevor. The note isn't signed. Could be anyone. Isabella wrapped her arms around herself. They said without evidence or witnesses, there's not much they can do. Dante turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. Do you believe it was Trevor? Yes. Then it was Trevor. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then looked at the two men who'd come with him. Marco, get someone to board up this window tonight. Tomorrow. I want it replaced with reinforced glass. The good stuff. On it, Marco said, already dialing. Leo, I want security cameras installed by tomorrow night. 4 angles, including the back entrance. And I want someone watching the feed 24/7 until this is resolved. The second man nodded and stepped outside to make calls. Isabella's head was spinning. Wait, I can't afford. You're not paying for it. Dante. Isabella. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. A man threw a brick through your window. He's escalating. This doesn't stop here unless we stop it. We. The word came out smaller than she'd intended. Dante's expression softened, just slightly. Yes. We. I don't understand why you're doing this. Because it's the right thing to do. You don't strike me as someone who does things just because they're right. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You'd be surprised. Before Isabella could respond, Marco returned. Window guy will be here in an hour. Crew's coming to clean up the glass. Good. Dante looked around the store again, his analytical mind clearly cataloging exits, vulnerabilities, risks. You can't stay here tonight. Isabella's chest tightened. This is my home. I live upstairs. Which makes you a target. If Trevor knows where you work, he knows where you sleep. The words sent cold fear trickling down her spine. I don't have anywhere else to go. Hotel. I'll cover it. No. Isabella's voice was firm despite the fear. I'm not running from my own home. Dante studied her for a long moment. She could see him calculating, weighing options, probably planning 3 different ways to convince her she was wrong. Finally, he said, Then I'm staying. What? Someone needs to be here in case he comes back. It won't be you alone. You can't just, you have a life, a business. Which can wait. His tone left no room for argument. This is not negotiable, Isabella. She wanted to fight him. Wanted to insist she could handle this herself. But standing in her destroyed bookstore, looking at this man who'd appeared in her life 3 days ago and was now rearranging his entire schedule to keep her safe, Isabella felt something crack open inside her chest. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Why do you care this much? Dante was quiet for a moment. Then he said, My sister's name was Lucia. She was 28 when she died. Her husband had been hurting her for 2 years, and she never told anyone because she thought she could handle it. Thought asking for help made her weak. Isabella's throat tightened. By the time I found out, it was too late. He'd killed her in a rage one night, then killed himself. Dante's voice was steady, but his eyes held old grief. I spent 6 months after her funeral promising myself I'd never let another woman suffer like that. Not in my city. Not while I had the power to stop it. I'm not your sister, Isabella said softly. No, but you're someone's daughter, someone's friend, and you deserve to feel safe in your own home. He held her gaze. So I'm asking you, please, let me help. Isabella looked at this dangerous, complicated man standing in her broken bookstore, offering protection she desperately needed but was terrified to accept. And for the first time in 6 months, she made a choice that felt like bravery instead of survival. Okay, she whispered. Okay. By midnight, the window was boarded up, the glass was cleared, and a security team had done a full sweep of both the store and Isabella's apartment. Dante sat in the reading nook near the front of the store, laptop open, phone within reach, looking completely at ease despite the late hour. He'd sent Marco and Leo home, but insisted on taking the first watch himself. Isabella had tried to go upstairs to bed, but sleep felt impossible. Instead, she made tea and brought Dante a cup. You don't have to keep me company, he said as she settled into the chair across from him. You should rest. I can't sleep. Understandable. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the only sound the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the back and the occasional car passing outside. Can I ask you something? Isabella said finally. Of course. What you do, your work, is it dangerous? Dante looked up from his laptop, meeting her eyes. Sometimes. Have you ever hurt anyone? Yes. No hesitation. No justification. Just the truth. Isabella should have been frightened. Should have asked him to leave and never come back. Instead, she asked, Do you regret it? Dante considered the question. I regret the circumstances that made it necessary. But no, I don't regret protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Even if it means breaking the law. The law isn't always just, Isabella. Sometimes it protects the wrong people. She thought about the police officer who'd taken her report tonight, who'd basically told her there was nothing they could do until Trevor actually hurt her. About all the restraining orders that were just pieces of paper. About Amber's shaking voice on the phone. I think I understand, she said quietly. Dante's expression softened. I hope you never have to. They fell into silence again, but it felt different now, less wary, more companionable. After a while, Isabella said, Thank you. For all of this. I know I fought you on it, but thank you. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. She met his eyes. What you said about your sister. I'm sorry. That must have been devastating. Pain flickered across Dante's face. It was. Still is some days. Is that why you do what you do? The protection work. Partly. After Lucia died, I realized I'd spent my whole life building power, but using it for the wrong things. Money, territory, reputation. He shook his head. She would have hated what I'd become. So I changed it. Not all of it. I'm still not a good man, Isabella. But I'm trying to be a better one. Isabella's chest tightened with an emotion she couldn't name. I think you're better than you give yourself credit for. Dante looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes. Then he said very quietly, You should go to bed. I'll wake you if anything happens. Isabella nodded, recognizing the dismissal for what it was, self-protection. She'd gotten too close to something true, and he'd retreated. She stood, carrying her empty mug toward the back. At the doorway to the stairs, she paused. Dante. Yes. I'm glad you walked into my bookstore that night. She didn't wait for his response. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, closed the door, and finally, let herself cry. Downstairs, Dante sat alone in the dark, his hand curled into a fist against his chest, and wondered what the hell he was doing. Isabella woke to the smell of coffee and something else, bread, maybe, or pastries. She blinked at her ceiling, disoriented, before the events of last night came rushing back. The brick, the broken window, Dante sitting guard downstairs while she slept. She checked her phone. 7:15 a.m. She'd actually slept somehow. Isabella got dressed quickly, jeans and a sweater, and headed downstairs. The sight that greeted her made her stop on the bottom step. Dante stood at the small cafe table near the back, setting out paper bags and coffee cups. He'd rolled up his shirt sleeves, and his hair was slightly mussed, like he'd run his hands through it a few times. He looked tired but alert, and when he saw her, something in his expression gentled. Good morning, he said. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got a variety. Isabella approached slowly, taking in the spread, croissants, bagels, muffins, fruit. You didn't have to do this. I was hungry. Figured you might be too. He handed her a coffee. Latte, 2 sugars. Marco asked the barista what women usually order. Despite everything, Isabella almost smiled. That's very thoughtful of Marco. He has 3 sisters. Says they trained him well. They sat down across from each other, and for a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence. Isabella kept stealing glances at Dante, trying to reconcile the man who'd threatened her ex-husband with the one who'd bought her breakfast. Did anything happen last night? She asked. No. Quiet. Dante took a sip of his black coffee. The security cameras are being installed today. After that, you'll have 24/7 monitoring. And Trevor, Dante's expression darkened. I have people watching him. If he comes within 2 blocks of this store, I'll know. Isabella should have asked how that was legal. Should have protested the invasion of Trevor's privacy. Instead, she just felt relieved. What about Amber? The question came out before she could stop it. His fiancée. She called me a few days ago. She was scared of him. Dante's eyes sharpened. What did she say? Isabella told him about the phone call, about Amber's fear and Trevor's escalating texts. I told her to trust herself, but I don't know if she listened. And then last night happened, and She stopped, guilt washing over her. I should have done more. You did what you could. Dante's voice was gentle. You can't save someone who isn't ready to leave. Is that what happened with your sister? The question hung in the air between them. Isabella immediately regretted it. I'm sorry. That was too personal. No. Dante set down his coffee, his expression distant. No, you're right. Lucia wasn't ready to leave. Or maybe she was, and I just didn't see it in time. Isabella waited, sensing he needed to tell this story. Needed someone to hear it. After a long moment, Dante continued. Lucia was my baby sister. 5 years younger than me. She was the good one, went to college, became a teacher, actually believed people were fundamentally decent. His lips curved in a sad smile. She hated what I did for a living. Used to lecture me about morality and choices. She sounds wonderful, Isabella said softly. She was. Dante's voice roughened. She met him at a friend's wedding. James Moretti. Charming, educated, came from a good family. I didn't like him immediately. Something about the way he looked at her, like she was a possession. But Lucia was in love. Said I was being overprotective. Isabella's chest tightened. She knew where this was going. They got married. For the first year, everything seemed fine. Then Lucia started canceling family dinners. Making excuses. When I'd see her, she'd have bruises she'd explain away. Clumsy, tripped, walked into a door. Dante's hands curled into fists on the table. I knew. I fucking knew. But every time I tried to talk to her, she'd shut me down. Said everything was fine. Said I was imagining things. She was protecting him, Isabella said quietly. And herself. Admitting it would have made it real. Dante looked at her sharply. You sound like you understand. Trevor never hit me. But he hurt me in other ways. Made me believe I was the problem. Too boring, too needy, too much and not enough all at once. Isabella's voice was steady, but her hands trembled around her coffee cup. It took me 3 years to leave. And even then, I wasn't sure I was making the right choice. Part of me wondered if he was right about me. Something shifted in Dante's expression, recognition, maybe, or respect. What made you finally leave? I was at a bookstore, actually. Different one, before I opened this place. I saw a little girl with her father, and he was reading to her, and she looked at him like he hung the moon. Isabella's eyes stung with the memory. And I thought, if I stay, if Trevor and I have kids, will they see him treat me that way? Will they learn that love looks like humiliation? So you left. So I left. Filed for divorce the next week. He fought me on everything, the apartment, the savings, even the car. Not because he wanted those things, but because he wanted to punish me for choosing myself. She met Dante's eyes. The worst part is, I still have days where I wonder if he was right. If I am forgettable. You're not. Dante said it with such certainty that Isabella felt something crack open in her chest. He was wrong about you. Completely, devastatingly wrong. They sat in the weight of that truth for a moment. Then Isabella asked gently, what happened to Lucia? Dante's jaw tightened. 2 years into the marriage, she finally called me. Middle of the night, crying so hard I could barely understand her. Said she was ready to leave, that she needed help. I went to pick her up immediately. He paused, and Isabella could see him reliving it. The hope, the relief, the terrible thing that came next. I got there 20 minutes too late. By the time I broke down the door, James had already. His voice fractured. She was gone, and he'd shot himself. Left me a note that said, if I couldn't have her, no one could. Oh, Dante. Isabella's hand moved across the table without conscious thought, covering his. I'm so sorry. Dante stared at their joined hands, his voice hollow. I should have done more. Should have dragged her out of that house the first time I suspected. Should have. You couldn't have known. I should have. The words came out fierce, angry. I had all the power in the world, money, connections, people who'd do anything I asked, and I couldn't save the one person who actually mattered. Isabella squeezed his hand. It wasn't your job to save her. It was your job to love her. And you did. She knew that. Did she? Because in the end, I failed her. No. James failed her. The system that should have protected her failed her. Isabella's voice was firm. But you loved her enough to come when she called. That's not failure. That's showing up. Dante's eyes met hers, dark and full of pain he'd been carrying for years. I don't know how to forgive myself. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe you just have to keep showing up for the people who need you. Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding, connection, the recognition of two people who'd been broken by people they'd trusted and were trying to figure out how to be whole again. Dante turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. Is that what you're doing? Showing up? Trying to? Some days are harder than others. Like yesterday. Like yesterday. Isabella managed a small smile. But you showed up too. I'll keep showing up, Isabella. As long as you need me. The promise hung in the air between them, weighted with more than protection. Isabella knew she should pull her hand away, should maintain distance, should remember that this man was dangerous and complicated and nothing like the safe, quiet life she'd been trying to build. But she didn't let go. Instead, she asked, "What was Lucia's favorite book?" Dante blinked, surprised by the question. "A Jane Eyre." She read it at least a dozen times. Used to say Jane understood what it meant to be strong and soft at the same time. Isabella stood up, still holding his hand, and led him to the classics section. She scanned the shelf and pulled out a worn hardcover edition of Jane Eyre. This was my mother's. First edition, 1943. She pressed it into Dante's hands. "I want you to have it." "Isabella, I can't. This must be worth. It's worth giving to someone who'll understand why it matters." She closed his fingers around the book. "Keep it. Remember her. Remember that she loved you enough to call you when she needed help, even if the timing was wrong." Dante looked down at the book, then back at Isabella, and for the first time since she'd met him, his carefully controlled expression completely crumbled. His eyes shone with unshed tears. "Thank you," he whispered. Isabella did something she'd never imagined doing. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. For a moment, Dante stood frozen. Then his arms came around her, holding her carefully, like she was something precious and breakable. Isabella felt his chest rise and fall with unsteady breaths, felt the way he was trying so hard to maintain control and failing. "It's okay," she murmured against his shoulder. "You don't have to be strong right now." And finally, Dante let himself break. He held her in the middle of the bookstore that smelled like cinnamon and old pages, and he cried for his sister, for all the women he couldn't save, for the man he'd been and the man he was trying to become. And Isabella held him, this dangerous man who'd shown up for her when no one else had, and understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone see you fall apart. They stayed like that for a long time. Long enough that the morning light shifted through the boarded window. Long enough that Isabella's phone buzzed twice with customer inquiries she ignored. Long enough that something fundamental shifted between them. When they finally pulled apart, Dante wiped his eyes, looking almost embarrassed. "I don't usually." "I know." Isabella's voice was gentle. "Thank you for trusting me with that." Dante looked at her, really looked at her. And Isabella felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with pity or judgment. He saw her scars and didn't flinch. Saw her strength and didn't diminish it. "You're remarkable," he said quietly. "I hope you know that." Isabella's breath caught. "I'm really not." "You are. You survived something that tried to break you. And you're still here. Still kind. Still willing to help someone like Amber, even though it costs you." His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, the gesture achingly tender. "Trevor was a fool to let you go. He didn't let me go. I left. Even better." Dante's thumb traced her cheekbone, and Isabella's heart hammered in her chest. That takes real courage. They were standing too close. Isabella knew it. Knew she should step back, should maintain boundaries, should remember that this, whatever this was, couldn't go anywhere good. But she didn't move. Neither did Dante. The air between them felt electric, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Isabella's eyes dropped to his mouth, then back up to his eyes, and she saw the exact moment Dante realized what she was thinking. "Isabella," he said, his voice rough, "if I kiss you right now, I won't want to stop." Her heart was racing. "Then don't stop." Dante's control, already hanging by a thread, snapped. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was desperate and hungry, and years of loneliness pouring into a single moment. Isabella gasped against his mouth, and Dante's hands came up to cup her face, angling her head to deepen the kiss. Isabella had forgotten what it felt like to be wanted like this. Not as a possession or a project, but as a person. Someone worthy of desire and tenderness and fierce, consuming need. She fisted her hands in Dante's shirt, pulling him closer, and felt him smile against her mouth. "Remarkable," he murmured between kisses. "Absolutely remarkable." They broke apart, both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "This is a terrible idea," Isabella whispered. "The worst," Dante agreed. "You're dangerous. Very. And complicated. Extremely. And I'm a mess." Dante pulled back just enough to look at her, his dark eyes soft. "Then we'll be a mess together." Isabella laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in what felt like months. "What are we doing?" "I have no idea. But I don't want to stop." "Me neither." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. And for the first time since Trevor had walked out of her life, Isabella felt something other than fear or shame. She felt hope. The next 2 weeks existed in a space between reality and dream. Dante didn't leave. Not completely. He went home to shower and change, handled his business from Isabella's back office, sent Marco to meetings he'd normally attend himself. But every night he came back. Sometimes with dinner, Thai food, Italian, once an entire feast from a Lebanese restaurant that had them eating leftovers for days. Sometimes with books he'd found at estate sales, rare editions he thought she'd love. Always with coffee in the morning. Isabella tried to maintain normalcy. She opened the store, helped customers, updated inventory. But everything felt different now. The new window, reinforced, tinted, made her feel safer. The security cameras meant she could breathe without constantly looking over her shoulder. And Dante's presence, steady and solid, made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Protected. Seen. Wanted. They didn't talk about what they were doing. Didn't define it or examine it too closely. They just existed together. On the fifth night, Isabella found Dante reading in the armchair by the window. Actually reading, not just holding a book as an excuse to stay. She'd closed the store an hour ago, and soft jazz played from the speaker behind the counter. "What are you reading?" she asked, bringing him tea. He held up the cover. Pride and Prejudice. The same book he'd bought the first night they met. "You're actually reading it?" She couldn't hide her surprise. "You seemed offended when I grabbed it at random. Thought I should give it a fair shot." Dante accepted the tea with a small smile. "I'm on chapter 12. And Elizabeth Bennet reminds me of you." Isabella laughed, settling into the chair across from him. "How so?" She refuses to be diminished. Refuses to accept how people see her when they're wrong. His eyes met hers over the rim of his cup. She knows her own worth, even when everyone around her questions it. Isabella's throat tightened. "I don't know if I'm quite there yet. You're closer than you think." They fell into comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Outside, Portland rain pattered against the new window. Inside, the bookstore felt like a sanctuary. "Can I ask you something?" Isabella said after a while. "Always. What happened with Trevor? You said you have people watching him, but you haven't mentioned him in days." Dante's expression hardened slightly. "He's been quiet. Careful. He knows we're watching." "Has he contacted Amber?" "No. She filed a restraining order 3 days ago." Dante's tone softened. "She left him. Got her own apartment across town. One of my people made sure her building has good security." Relief flooded through Isabella. "She actually left. You helped with that. That phone call, it planted a seed. You helped too. The way you handled him that first night." She saw there were people who wouldn't let him get away with it. Dante set down his tea, his expression serious. "I need to tell you something. About that night." Isabella's stomach tightened. "Okay. When I told Trevor this bookstore was under my family's protection, that wasn't entirely true. Not then." He held her gaze. "But it is now. Officially. I've put the word out that this place and you are off limits. No one in this city will touch you without answering to me." Isabella should have felt trapped by that declaration. Should have bristled at the idea of being claimed as territory. Instead, she felt tears prick her eyes. "Why would you do that?" "Because the idea of something happening to you." Dante's voice roughened. "I can't. I won't. Dante, I know this is fast. I know I'm probably terrifying you with how much He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "I'm not good at this. At caring about someone. After Lucia, I told myself I wouldn't let anyone matter that much again. It was safer that way. And now I'm breaking all my own rules." His smile was self-deprecating. "You broke them the moment you looked at me like I was a person instead of a monster." Isabella set down her own cup and crossed the space between them, kneeling beside his chair. "You're not a monster. I've done monstrous things. To protect people. There's a difference." Dante's hand came up to cradle her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. "You make me want to be better than I am. You're already better than you think." Isabella covered his hand with hers. "You just needed someone to see it." He kissed her then, soft, reverent, nothing like the desperate hunger of that first kiss. This one was a promise. A beginning. When they pulled apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight. Not down here, upstairs. In your space. Let me hold you." Isabella's heart raced. They hadn't crossed that line yet, had been dancing around it for days. "Just hold me. Just hold you. Unless you want more. But there's no pressure, Isabella. I want to be close to you." It was the vulnerability in his voice that decided her. This powerful, dangerous man, asking permission. Offering tenderness without demands. Okay, she whispered. Yes. Isabella's apartment was small. A studio with exposed brick, a bed tucked in the corner, bookshelves lining every available wall. She suddenly felt self-conscious about the mismatched furniture, the slightly crooked picture frames, the pile of laundry she hadn't folded yet. But Dante looked around like he was seeing something precious. It's very you. Messy. Lived in. Loved. Real. He turned to her, hands in his pockets. I have a penthouse downtown. Marble counters, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. And it feels like a museum. This, he gestured around. This feels like a home. Isabella's chest tightened with emotion. You can take off your jacket. Get comfortable. Dante shrugged out of his suit jacket, loosened his tie. Underneath, his dress shirt was crisp white, tailored perfectly to his frame. He looked absurdly out of place in her bohemian space, and yet completely right. I should probably. Isabella gestured vaguely toward her bedroom area. Change. Get ready for bed. Take your time. She grabbed pajamas, soft cotton pants, and an oversized t-shirt, nothing fancy, and disappeared into the bathroom. Her hands shook as she washed her face, brushed her teeth, changed clothes. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were bright. Her cheeks were flushed. She looked happy. When she came out, Dante had removed his shoes and tie, rolled up his shirt sleeves. He'd turned down her bed and was standing by the window, looking out at the rain-soaked street below. You can see the park from here, he said without turning around. It's why I chose this place. Trevor hated it. Said the view was wasted on a park. He wanted floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the city. Isabella moved to stand beside him. But I love watching the trees change with the seasons. Watching people walk their dogs in the morning. It's perfect. Dante turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. You're perfect. I'm really not. To me you are. Isabella didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to accept such unvarnished adoration. So she did the only thing she could think of. She took his hand and led him to bed. They lay down facing each other, the space between them charged with possibility. Dante reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and drew her into his arms. Isabella pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of him. Cedar and smoke and something uniquely Dante. His heart beat steady beneath her ear, and his hand traced slow patterns on her back. Tell me something, he murmured into her hair. Something no one else knows. Isabella thought about it. I've been writing a book about a woman who escapes an emotionally abusive relationship and opens a bookstore in a city where she knows no one. It's semi-autobiographical. Can I read it? It's not very good. I doubt that's true. Isabella tilted her head to look up at him. What about you? Tell me something no one else knows. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm afraid of losing you. I've known you for 2 weeks, and the idea of you not being in my life anymore, it terrifies me. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. I'm afraid too, Isabella admitted. Afraid this is moving too fast. Afraid I'll mess it up. Afraid you'll wake up one day and realize Trevor was right about me. That will never happen. You can't know that. Yes, I can. Dante's arms tightened around her. Because I've spent my entire adult life reading people. Knowing who to trust, who to fear, who to keep close and who to push away. And everything in me says you're someone worth keeping. Isabella felt tears slip down her cheeks. I don't know how to do this. How to let someone in again. Neither do I. So we'll figure it out together. He kissed her forehead, her temple, the tear tracks on her cheeks. And Isabella let herself believe, just for tonight, that maybe she could have this. Maybe she deserved this. They talked for hours, trading stories and secrets in the dark. Dante told her about growing up in a crime family, about his father's disappointment when he chose to shift the family business toward protection instead of extortion. Isabella told him about her mother, who'd raised her alone after her father left, who'd taught her that strength came in quiet forms. Somewhere around midnight, Isabella started to drift off, warm and safe in Dante's arms. Isabella. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. I'm falling in love with you. Her eyes flew open. She pulled back to look at him, to see if he was serious. He was. His dark eyes held nothing but truth. You don't have to say it back, Dante continued quickly. I know it's too soon. I needed you to know. Isabella's heart was pounding. She thought about all the reasons this was crazy, impossible, too much too fast. Then she thought about the way he'd shown up when her window was broken. The way he'd cried in her arms over his sister. The way he looked at her like she was worth everything. I think I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. And it terrifies me. Dante's smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face into something almost boyish. Good. Be terrified with me. He kissed her, and this time there was joy in it. Promise. Hope. They fell asleep tangled together, rain drumming against the window, the weight of their confessions settling into something that felt almost like peace. What would you risk for someone who sees you for who you truly are? Share your thoughts below. The next morning, Isabella woke to sunlight and the smell of coffee. She blinked awake to find Dante already up, dressed in yesterday's clothes, standing in her tiny kitchen making breakfast. You cook? She asked, her voice still rough with sleep. I scramble eggs and toast bread. That's about the extent of it. He looked over his shoulder, smiling. Good morning. Good morning. Isabella wrapped the blanket around herself and padded over to the kitchen. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. He plated the eggs, added the toast, and set everything on her small table. Besides, I owe you about a dozen breakfasts. They ate together, comfortable and domestic in a way that should have felt strange, but didn't. Isabella kept stealing glances at him. This man who'd somehow become essential to her life in the span of 2 weeks. I need to go handle some business today, Dante said eventually. But I'll be back tonight. Unless, he hesitated. Unless you need space. I know I've been here a lot. I don't need space. The words came out more certain than Isabella expected. I like having you here. Relief flickered across his face. Good, because I like being here. After breakfast, Dante gathered his things. At the door, he kissed her, long and deep and full of promises, then pulled back with obvious reluctance. Lock the door behind me. And Isabella. Yeah, send me a few pages of your book. I want to read it. Before she could protest, he was gone. Isabella stood in her apartment, coffee cup in hand, and realized she was smiling. Actually, genuinely smiling. For the first time since her divorce, she felt like herself again. Like someone worthy of love and mornings and soft promises whispered in the dark. She opened her laptop, pulled up her manuscript, and started writing. 3 days later, everything fell apart. Isabella was shelving new arrivals when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up with her automatic smile, ready to greet a customer. Instead, she saw Trevor. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled suit, eyes bloodshot and wild. The confident, controlled man she'd once been married to had been replaced by something desperate and unhinged. We need to talk. His voice was too loud in the quiet store. Isabella's hand tightened on the book she was holding. You need to leave. Now. I said we need to talk. Trevor moved closer, and Isabella instinctively backed toward the counter where the panic button Dante's team had installed was hidden. Do you have any idea what you've done to my life? I haven't done anything to you. Bullshit. Trevor slammed his hand on a nearby shelf, making Isabella flinch. Amber left me. Filed a fucking restraining order. My boss is asking questions about my personal conduct. And I know it's because of you. Amber left because you scared her. That has nothing to do with me. You turned her against me. Just like you're trying to turn everyone against me. Trevor's face was flushed, spittle flying as he spoke. And your mobster boyfriend. You think I don't know he's been having me followed? That he's been spreading lies about me. They're not lies if they're true. The words were out before Isabella could stop them. Trevor's face went dark with rage. You self-righteous bitch. You think you're so much better than me now? You think having some criminal's protection makes you special? He laughed, harsh and mean. You're still the same pathetic woman I divorced. Still hiding. Still needing a man to fight your battles. Each word was designed to wound, to reduce her back to the woman she'd been. Small, apologetic, afraid. But Isabella wasn't that woman anymore. Get out. Her voice was steady, even as her heart hammered. Get out now, or I'm calling the police. Call them. Call your boyfriend. I don't care anymore. Trevor moved toward the counter, and Isabella's hand found the panic button. She pressed it, knowing Marco or whoever was monitoring the feed would see this, would send help. But Trevor was between her and the door. You know what I realized? Trevor's voice dropped to something soft and dangerous. You were always going to leave. Always going to decide you were too good for me. So really, I should thank you. You leaving? That freed me from wasting any more time on someone so fundamentally broken. I'm not broken. Yes, you are. You're damaged goods, Isabella. Caruso's just too stupid to see it yet. But he will. Men like him don't stay with women like you. You're a project. A charity case. And when he gets bored, and he will get bored, you'll be right back where you started. Alone. Forgettable. There it was again. That word. The one that haunted her late at night when doubt crept in. Forgettable. Isabella felt something inside her crack. Not break, but crack open, and what poured out wasn't pain or shame. It was rage. You want to know what I realized, Trevor? Her voice was quiet but deadly. You're the one who's broken. You're so insecure, so pathetic, that the only way you can feel powerful is by tearing down the people who love you. Trevor's eyes widened. You didn't leave me because I was boring. You left because I was starting to see through you. Starting to realize that your cruelty wasn't about my inadequacy. It was about yours. Isabella stood up straighter, feeling years of shame burning away. And yes, Dante protects me, but not because I'm weak. Because he's strong enough to stand beside someone without needing to diminish them. You think he cares about you? Trevor laughed. He's using you. Men like him always have an angle. Maybe, but at least he sees me. Really sees me. You looked at me every day for 8 years and never once saw who I actually was. Trevor's face contorted with fury. You ungrateful. The door burst open. But it wasn't Marco or Dante's security team. It was Dante himself. And the look on his face was murderous. Isabella had never seen Dante lose control. He was always so carefully composed, every movement calculated, every word measured. Even when he'd cried over Lucia, there'd been a kind of grace to it. This was different. Dante crossed the bookstore in 3 strides, grabbed Trevor by the collar, and slammed him against the nearest wall hard enough that books tumbled from the shelves. You were told. Dante's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than any shout, to stay away from her. Trevor's bravado crumbled. I just wanted to talk. You came to her store. You cornered her. You verbally abused her. Each sentence was punctuated by Dante tightening his grip. After I explicitly told you what would happen if you came near her again. Dante. Isabella's voice was shaking. Dante let him go. He didn't seem to hear her. His knuckles were white where they gripped Trevor's collar, and Isabella could see the barely restrained violence in every line of his body. Do you know what I do to men who hurt women? Dante asked Trevor conversationally. I make sure they understand consequences. Real, permanent consequences. You can't, I'll go to the police. And tell them what? That you violated a warning from the Caruso family. Dante laughed, cold and humorless. Every cop in this city knows better than to get involved in our business. You're on your own, Trevor. Dante, please. Isabella moved closer, her hand reaching for his arm. Please don't do this. He needs to learn. I know, but not like this. Her voice was gentle but firm. Not in front of me. Not in my store. Please. Something in her tone got through. Dante's grip loosened slightly, and he finally looked at her. The rage in his eyes was still there, but underneath it was something else, fear. Fear that she'd been hurt. Fear that he'd been too late. Did he touch you? Dante asked. No. I'm okay. Did he threaten you? Just words. Dante, I'm fine. I promise. Dante's jaw clenched. He turned back to Trevor, who was pressed against the wall, shaking. You have 5 seconds to leave this store. If I ever see you again, if you so much as think about Isabella, I will make you disappear. Do you understand me? Trevor nodded frantically. I said, do you understand me? Yes. Yes, I understand. Dante released him with a shove. Trevor stumbled toward the door, cast one last hateful look at Isabella, and fled. The silence he left behind was deafening. Isabella stood frozen, watching Dante. He was breathing hard, his hands still clenched into fists, his entire body radiating barely controlled fury. Dante, I should have been here sooner. I was on the other side of town when the alert came through. His voice was rough, self-recriminating. If something had happened. But it didn't. I'm okay. He could have hurt you. But he didn't. Because you got lucky. Dante whirled to face her, and Isabella took an involuntary step back. Because this time I got here in time. What about next time? What if I'm not fast enough? There won't be a next time. You scared him. He'll stay away now. You don't know that. Men like him. They don't stop. They escalate. Dante ran his hands through his hair, agitated. I should have handled this differently. Should have dealt with him permanently the first night. Isabella's stomach went cold. What does that mean, dealt with him permanently? It means I should have made sure he could never come near you again. By hurting him? By doing whatever was necessary. That's not your decision to make. Isabella's voice rose. This is my life, Dante. My problem. You don't get to just take over and make choices for me. I'm trying to protect you. I didn't ask you to. The words exploded out of her, surprising them both. I didn't ask you to threaten him or follow him or violently assault him in my store. Dante stared at her like she'd slapped him. I was defending you. I was defending myself. I was handling it. And then you burst in here like, she gestured wildly. Like I'm some helpless victim who needs a man to save her. That's not what I think. Isn't it? You just said I got lucky. You said you should have handled this differently. As if I'm incapable of managing my own life. Isabella's voice cracked. I spent 8 years with a man who made me feel powerless. I won't do that again. Not even with you. The words hung between them, sharp and cutting. Dante's face went blank, that careful, controlled mask sliding back into place. I see. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you just prove that you don't trust me to take care of myself. I trust you. I don't trust him. Then trust that I know my limits. Trust that I'll ask for help when I need it. Isabella wrapped her arms around herself. I pressed the panic button. I called for help. What I didn't ask for was you to come in here ready to commit murder. I would never have actually. Wouldn't you? Isabella met his eyes. Because I've heard the stories, Dante. I know what you're capable of. And seeing it in person, seeing how close you came to losing control. She shook her head. It scared me. The words landed like blows. Dante's expression shuddered completely. I scared you. The violence scared me. The lack of control scared me. I was trying to protect you. I know, but I need you to protect me with me, not from me. Isabella's eyes stung with tears. I need to be part of the decisions about my own safety. I need to have agency. Otherwise, I'm just trading one controlling relationship for another. Dante flinched like she'd struck him. That's not fair. Isn't it? You had him followed without telling me. You put out the word that I'm under your protection without asking me. You decided what level of threat he posed and how to handle it without ever consulting me. Isabella's voice broke. I'm grateful for everything you've done, but I can't be with someone who makes me a bystander in my own life. So what are you saying? Isabella looked at this man she'd started to fall in love with, this complicated, dangerous, tender man who'd shown up for her in ways no one else had. And she felt her heart breaking. I'm saying I need space. Time to think. Isabella, please. She held up a hand. Please just go. Dante stood there for a long moment, looking like he wanted to argue, to fight, to fix this. Then his shoulders sagged slightly. If that's what you want, it's what I need. He nodded once, sharp and final. Marco will continue monitoring the security feeds. My people will still watch the block. Whatever you think of me right now, I won't leave you unprotected. Dante, that's non-negotiable. His voice was flat, emotionless. Hate me if you need to, but you're still under my protection. That doesn't change. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. For a moment, Isabella thought he might turn around, might say something that would fix the chasm that had opened between them. Instead, he said quietly, I'm sorry I scared you. That was never my intention. Then he was gone. Isabella stood alone in her bookstore, the place that had always been her sanctuary, and felt it become a prison. She looked around at the shelves Dante's people had repaired, the window they'd replaced, the security cameras they'd installed. Evidence of his care. Evidence of his control. She didn't know which it was anymore. Isabella sank down behind the counter, pulled her knees to her chest, and finally let herself cry. Not for Trevor. Not even really for Dante. For herself. For the woman who'd thought she'd finally found someone safe, only to realize that safety and control were sometimes two sides of the same coin. For the terrifying question that now haunted her. Was she strong enough to love someone powerful without losing herself in the process? She didn't know the answer, and that scared her more than anything. The bookstore felt too quiet. Isabella had gotten used to Dante's presence. The sound of him moving through the space, the soft tap of his laptop keys, the way he hummed under his breath when he thought she wasn't listening. Now the silence was oppressive, pressing in on her from all sides. 3 days had passed since their fight. 3 days of Isabella opening the store, going through the motions, closing up, and climbing the stairs to her empty apartment. 3 days of checking her phone compulsively, hoping for a text that never came. Dante had kept his word. His security team still monitored the cameras. Marco had checked in once, professional, polite, asking if she needed anything. But Dante himself had stayed away, which was what she'd asked for. So why did it feel like she'd made a terrible mistake? You look miserable. Isabella looked up from the register to see Maya, her best friend since college, standing in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee and a knowing expression. I'm fine, Isabella said automatically. Liar. Maya set the coffees on the counter and hopped up to sit beside them, her colorful dress a bright spot in the gray afternoon. You've been fine for 3 days, which in Isabella's speak means you're absolutely falling apart. Isabella tried to smile. I'm not falling apart. Babe, you texted me at 2 in the morning asking if it's possible to be grateful for someone and furious at them simultaneously. That's falling apart. Maya studied her with concern. Talk to me. What happened with the hot mobster? Despite everything, Isabella almost laughed. Don't call him that. Why not? He is hot, and definitely some flavor of organized crime. Maya took a sip of her coffee. But also clearly in love with you, which I'm assuming is the problem? Isabella's eyes stung. It's complicated. The best things usually are. Isabella told her everything. From Trevor's confrontation to Dante's violent intervention to the fight that followed. Maya listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to understanding to something that looked almost like approval. So let me get this straight, Maya said when Isabella finished. This man who you've known for 3 weeks has kept you safe, made you feel seen for the first time in years, and then overstepped one time when he thought you were in danger. And you sent him away. He didn't just overstep, Maya. He was violent. He lost control. In defense of you. That doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't. Maya's voice was gentle but firm. But it also doesn't make him Trevor. And I think maybe you're confusing the two. Isabella's chest tightened. What do you mean? Trevor controlled you because he enjoyed making you small. He needed you to be less so he could feel like more. Maya reached out, taking Isabella's hand. Dante's trying to protect you because he's terrified of losing you. Those are not the same thing. But the result is the same, me losing my agency, my ability to make my own choices. Is it though? Because from what you just told me, you did make your own choices. You pressed the panic button. You defended yourself verbally. You told Trevor off. Maya squeezed her hand. And then when Dante showed up, you told him you needed space, and he gave it to you. That's not control, babe. That's respect. Isabella felt tears spill down her cheeks. Then why does it feel so wrong? Because you're scared. Because you're still healing from what Trevor did to you. And any behavior that even slightly resembles his triggers all your defenses. Maya's voice was soft. But Isabella, if you push away everyone who cares about you because they might hurt you, you're going to end up alone. And not the empowering kind of alone, the lonely kind. I don't know if I can do this. Be with someone like him. Someone who loves you fiercely. Someone who shows up. Someone who's willing to be vulnerable with you. Maya raised an eyebrow. Yeah, that sounds terrible. You know what I mean. I do. But I also think you're using his one mistake as an excuse to run. Maya's expression turned serious. Trevor taught you that love means losing yourself. But real love, healthy love, means choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Isabella wiped her eyes. What if I'm not strong enough? You are. You left Trevor. You built this place. You stood up to him 3 days ago before Dante even arrived. Maya smiled. You're the strongest person I know. You just need to start believing it. I miss him, Isabella whispered. Is that pathetic? I've known him 3 weeks, and I miss him like it's been months. That's not pathetic. That's love. Maya hopped down from the counter. Now the question is, what are you going to do about it? Isabella spent the rest of the day thinking about Maya's words. Was she running? Was she using Dante's overreaction as an excuse to protect herself from the risk of being hurt again? The truth was complicated. Yes, Dante had scared her. Yes, his violence had triggered every defense mechanism Trevor had installed. But Maya was right, he wasn't Trevor. He'd never tried to make her small. He'd celebrated her strength, encouraged her writing, treated her like an equal. Except in that one moment, when fear had overridden his judgment. One moment. One mistake. Was she really going to throw away something potentially beautiful because of one mistake? Isabella locked up the store at 8 and climbed the stairs to her apartment. She made tea, sat on her bed, and pulled out her laptop. Her manuscript sat open to the last page she'd written, a scene where her protagonist finally stands up to the man who'd tried to break her. Isabella had been stuck on this scene for weeks. But now, after everything with Trevor and Dante, the words flowed. She wrote for hours, pouring her confusion and fear and hope onto the page. She wrote about a woman learning that strength didn't mean doing everything alone, about the difference between protection and control, about the terrifying vulnerability of letting someone see you completely. By the time she looked up, it was past midnight. Her neck ached from hunching over the laptop, and her tea had gone cold. But she'd written 20 pages. More importantly, she'd figured something out. Isabella opened a new document and started typing. Dante, I've spent the last 3 days trying to figure out if I was right to push you away. Trying to decide if the fear I felt when you lost control was justified, or just my trauma speaking. I think it was both. You did scare me. Not because I thought you'd hurt me. I never thought that. But because I saw how close you came to doing something you couldn't take back. And I realized that loving you means accepting that you carry violence in you, even if you try to use it for good. That's hard for me. After Trevor, I promised myself I'd never be with someone who made me feel powerless again. And when you made decisions about my safety without consulting me, that's how I felt. But I've also realized something else. You're not Trevor. You've never tried to make me small. You've never enjoyed having power over me. You just love me in the way you know how, fiercely, protectively, sometimes too much. And I pushed you away not because you were controlling, but because I was afraid. Afraid of how much I need you. Afraid of how vulnerable loving you makes me. Afraid that if I let you in completely, I might lose myself again. But here's what I've figured out. I won't lose myself. Not with you. Because you see me, really see me. And you celebrate who I am instead of trying to reshape me into something else. I need you to understand something, though. I need to be part of the decisions about my life. Even the scary ones. Especially the scary ones. I need you to trust that I can handle hard things, and that asking for help doesn't make me weak. Can you do that? Can you protect me with me instead of for me? Because if you can, I'd really like you to come back. I miss you. I miss us. And I think I'm ready to be brave. Love, Isabella. She read it 3 times, her heart pounding. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she attached the last 20 pages of her manuscript and hit send. The email whooshed away. Isabella sat in the silence of her apartment, feeling both terrified and free. Now all she could do was wait. Dante received the email at 2:47 a.m. He'd been awake, had barely slept since Isabella sent him away. He spent his nights working, handling business that didn't require emotional bandwidth, trying not to think about the look on her face when she'd told him he scared her. When his phone chimed with her email notification, his heart stopped. He read her words once, then again, then a third time, hardly daring to believe what she was saying. I'd really like you to come back. I miss you. I think I'm ready to be brave. Dante's hands shook as he opened the attachment, pages from her manuscript. He started reading, and within paragraphs, he was completely absorbed. Isabella could write, really write. Her prose was clean and honest, her characters complex and real. The protagonist, clearly based on herself, was funny and wounded and learning to be strong in a way that had nothing to do with hardness. There was a male character too. Someone powerful and dangerous who falls for the protagonist. Someone trying to be better than his past. Someone who sounded a lot like Dante. In the scene Isabella had written tonight, the 2 characters had a fight. The man overreacts to a threat, and the woman calls him on it. They separate, both hurting. And then, Dante read the resolution she'd written, his vision blurring with tears. The woman realizes that pushing people away doesn't make her strong. It just makes her alone. The man realizes that true strength isn't about control, but about trust. They come back together, both vulnerable, both willing to try. It was their story, their fight, their potential resolution. And Isabella had written it as a love story. Dante closed his laptop, grabbed his keys, and headed for the door. Isabella woke to knocking. She blinked awake, confused, squinting at her phone. 3:30 a.m. The knocking came again, soft but insistent, from downstairs. Her heart began to race. She grabbed her phone and pulled up the security camera feed. The screen showed the front door of the bookstore. Dante stood there, still in the clothes he'd been wearing 3 days ago, looking exhausted and hopeful and terrified. Isabella's breath caught. She threw off her blanket, ran down the stairs in her pajamas, and unlocked the door. They stood staring at each other for a long moment. "Hi," Dante said finally, his voice rough. "Hi. I got your email." "I know. Can I come in?" Isabella stepped back, and Dante entered the bookstore. He looked around like he was seeing it for the first time, or maybe like he'd been afraid he'd never see it again. "You're a beautiful writer," he said without looking at her. "That scene, the fight, the resolution, Isabella, it was beautiful." "Thank you. Is that what you want? What you wrote? The two of them figuring it out?" "Yes." Finally, Dante turned to face her. His eyes were red-rimmed, his expression raw. "I'm sorry for scaring you, for losing control, for making decisions about your life without consulting you." He took a shaky breath. "You were right. I was treating you like someone who needed saving instead of someone who needed a partner." "Dante, let me finish. Please." He stepped closer. "I've spent my whole life trying to control everything because control meant safety. Meant I could prevent the bad things from happening. But I can't control everything. And trying to do that with you, trying to protect you from every possible threat, that's not fair to you. It's not trust. It's fear." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "I'm afraid of losing you," Dante continued, his voice breaking. "I'm afraid that I'm not good enough, that my past will catch up with us, that somehow you'll get hurt because of me. And that fear made me act like I had the right to make choices for you. But I don't. This is your life, your safety, and you get to decide how we handle threats." "Together," Isabella said softly. "We decide together." "Together," Dante agreed. "I can't promise I won't want to hurt people who threaten you. That instinct, it's part of who I am. But I can promise to talk to you first, to include you in decisions, to trust that you know your own limits. That's all I'm asking." Dante reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Isabella Chin, and I'm asking you to give me another chance to love you better." Isabella covered his hands with hers. "I love you too, and I'm asking you to let me be strong with you, not in spite of you. I can do that. Can you? Really? Because this won't be the last time something scary happens. And I need to know that you trust me to handle hard things. I do trust you. I need to learn how to show it better." Dante pressed his forehead to hers. "Teach me. Please. Teach me how to be the partner you need." Isabella felt something in her chest crack open. Not break, but open, like light finally reaching a place that had been dark too long. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Dante kissed her then, soft and reverent and full of promise. Not a kiss that demanded anything, but one that offered everything. When they pulled apart, both were crying. "Come upstairs," Isabella said. "Stay with me." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. I'm done being afraid. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing us." Dante's smile was brilliant, transforming his whole face. "I'm choosing you too." They climbed the stairs together, hand in hand, both fragile and hopeful and ready to try again. And as Isabella lay in Dante's arms, listening to his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, she finally understood what love was supposed to feel like. Not control disguised as care. Not diminishment disguised as partnership. Just two broken people, choosing to be whole together. 2 months later, Isabella stood in front of her closet, staring at the row of neutral cardigans and beige sweaters that had been her uniform for the past year. Then her eyes landed on the dress hanging on the outside of the door, deep emerald green, fitted, elegant. The kind of dress that demanded to be seen. Maya had helped her pick it out yesterday. "You're going to a charity gala with Portland's most eligible bachelor," her friend had said. "Time to stop dressing like you're apologizing for existing." Isabella reached for the green dress. The past 2 months had been a study in learning to trust again, both Dante and herself. They'd established boundaries, rules, ways of communicating that honored both his protective instincts and her need for autonomy. When Dante wanted to handle a threat, he talked to her first. When Isabella felt overwhelmed, she said so instead of retreating into silence. It wasn't always easy. Old patterns died hard. There were moments when Dante's jaw would clench with the effort of not taking over. Moments when Isabella would catch herself apologizing for taking up space. But they kept choosing each other, kept showing up. Dante had met Maya, who'd given him a 30-minute lecture about respecting Isabella's agency, while also threatening him with unspecified consequences if he ever hurt her friend. He'd taken it with surprising grace, even smiling when Maya hugged him at the end and whispered, "You're good for her." Isabella had met Marco properly, discovered he was funny and kind, with 3 sisters he talked about constantly and a wife he clearly adored. She'd met other members of Dante's team, had begun to understand that his business was more complicated than she'd initially thought. Some of it was illegal, yes, but much of it was protection, arbitration, keeping order in spaces where the law couldn't or wouldn't reach. It wasn't black and white. Dante wasn't a hero or a villain. He was just a man trying to use power responsibly in a world that didn't always reward responsibility. And somehow, Isabella had fallen deeper in love with him. Her book was almost finished, 90,000 words about survival and hope and learning to be seen. Dante read every chapter, offering thoughtful feedback and unflinching support. He'd connected her with a literary agent friend who'd agreed to read the manuscript when it was done. "You're talented," Dante had said when she'd protested she wasn't ready. "Stop hiding it." The bookstore was thriving. Word had gotten out, partly through Dante's network, partly through organic growth. That chapter and verse was special. A place where people felt safe, seen, welcomed. Isabella had hired part-time help, started hosting author events, even begun a writing group for women recovering from difficult relationships. Trevor had stayed away. The restraining order Amber filed had been granted, and rumor had it he'd moved to Seattle for a new job. Isabella didn't ask for details. She'd reclaimed her life, and Trevor no longer had a place in it. Amber had come by the bookstore once, tentative and nervous. They'd had coffee, talked about patterns and red flags and how hard it was to leave. Amber was in therapy now, rebuilding. She'd thanked Isabella for believing her, for taking her seriously. "You saved my life," Amber had said. "No," Isabella had replied gently. "You saved your own life. I just witnessed it." Now, standing in her apartment wearing a dress that made her feel powerful instead of invisible, Isabella took a breath and smiled at her reflection. She looked like herself. Finally, Dante arrived at 7, looking devastating in a black tuxedo that fit him like it had been made for him, which it probably had. He stopped in the doorway of her apartment, his eyes widening. "Isabella, too much?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You're breathtaking." He crossed to her, taking her hands. "Absolutely breathtaking." She felt herself blush. "Maya helped. Remind me to send Maya flowers." Dante kissed her softly. "Are you ready?" "I think so. Tell me again what this event is." "Annual charity gala for children's hospitals. Very formal, very boring, full of people who'll pretend to like each other." His expression turned serious. "But also the kind of event where I need to be seen. Need to maintain relationships." "I understand." "And Isabella?" Dante squeezed her hands. "Some of these people will know who I am, what I do. They might look at you differently because you're with me. I can handle it. I know you can. But if at any point you want to leave, we'll leave together." "I know." Isabella smiled. "We're partners, remember? I've got your back." Something in Dante's expression softened. "I love you. I love you too. Now let's go before I lose my nerve." The gala was held at the Columbia Tower Ballroom, the same place where Dante had been the night he'd first walked into Isabella's bookstore. "Full circle," he murmured as they entered. The ballroom was stunning, crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, men in tuxedos and women in gowns that probably cost more than Isabella's monthly rent. She felt momentarily overwhelmed by the wealth, the sophistication, the casual power on display. Then Dante's hand found the small of her back, not possessive, just present, and she remembered. She belonged here. She'd earned her place. They made their way through the crowd, Dante introducing her to various people. A tech CEO, a city councilwoman, a federal judge who greeted Dante with surprising warmth. "Caruso, good to see you." "And who is this?" "Isabella Chin. She owns Chapter and Verse Bookstore in the Pearl District." "A bookstore owner. How refreshing." The judge smiled at Isabella. "What do you stock?" And just like that, Isabella found herself in a conversation about literature and small business, and the importance of community spaces. The judge, Judge Martinez, was intelligent and funny, and she clearly respected Dante. As they moved away, Isabella whispered, "A federal judge is friends with you?" Dante's lips quirked. I told you, it's complicated. Not everyone in power is clean, and not everyone outside the law is dirty. Martinez and I have an understanding. Which is? I help her with cases that fall through legal cracks. She makes sure I don't end up in prison. He said it so casually that Isabella almost laughed. Your life is very strange, says the woman who fell in love with me anyway. Fair point. They made their way to their table, a prime location near the front. Marco was already seated with his wife, Elena, a petite woman with kind eyes who immediately pulled Isabella into conversation about books and coffee and the best places to eat in Portland. The evening unfolded in a blur of courses and speeches and carefully orchestrated networking. Isabella watched Dante work the room with practiced ease. Charming when needed, intimidating when necessary, always aware of the power dynamics at play. This was his world, and he navigated it with the same skill he brought to everything else. But throughout it all, he kept coming back to her. A hand on her shoulder, a whispered joke during a boring speech, a look across the room that said, I see you. You're the only person here who matters. Isabella felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with being arm candy or a trophy. Dante introduced her as a writer, asked her opinions during conversations, made it clear she was his partner, not his accessory. During dessert, the event coordinator took the stage to announce the evening's donation totals and thank major contributors. Dante's name was called. His family's foundation had donated $500,000. The room applauded. Dante nodded acknowledgement, but didn't stand. That's a lot of money, Isabella whispered. Lucia loved kids. It's the least I can do. Isabella squeezed his hand under the table. Then the coordinator said something that made Isabella's heart stop. And we have a surprise announcement. One of our guests has requested the microphone for a special moment. Mr. Caruso. Dante stood, and the entire room turned to look at him. Isabella's pulse skyrocketed. Dante, what are you doing? He smiled, nervous, hopeful, terrified. Something I should have done weeks ago. He walked to the stage, accepted the microphone, and for a moment just stood there. 300 people waited in anticipation. Then Dante spoke. I'm not good at public speaking. I prefer to work behind the scenes, where I can control outcomes. A few knowing laughs from the crowd. But there's someone here tonight who's taught me that control isn't the same as connection. That being seen, really seen, is worth the risk of vulnerability. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. She knew where this was going. 6 months ago, I walked into a bookstore on a whim. I met a woman who'd been told her whole life that she was forgettable, invisible, not enough. Dante's voice roughened with emotion. And I knew immediately that whoever told her those things was a liar and a fool. The room was silent, captivated. Isabella Chun is the most remarkable person I've ever met. She's brave and kind and so damn strong it takes my breath away. She survived someone who tried to break her, and instead of becoming bitter, she built a sanctuary. Instead of hiding, she learned to be seen. Dante stepped down from the stage, walking toward Isabella's table. She stood on shaking legs, tears streaming down her face. She taught me that love isn't about possession or protection. It's about partnership, about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He stopped in front of her, and the entire ballroom watched as Dante Caruso, one of the most powerful men in Portland, dropped to one knee. Isabella Chun, you are unforgettable. You are seen. You are loved. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a stunning emerald ring. Will you marry me? Isabella couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The room spun around her. 300 faces, all watching, waiting for her answer. For a moment, she was back in that courtroom, Trevor's voice echoing, forgettable, boring, not enough. Then she looked at Dante, at this complicated, dangerous, tender man who'd chosen to be vulnerable in front of everyone, who'd declared his love publicly when he could have done this privately, safely. He was giving her what Trevor had taken. Public validation. Public proof that she was worthy of being chosen. Yes, Isabella whispered. Then louder. Yes. Dante's face broke into the most beautiful smile she'd ever seen. He slid the ring onto her finger, stood, and pulled her into his arms. The ballroom erupted in applause. And as Dante kissed her, in front of judges and CEOs and everyone who'd ever underestimated either of them, Isabella felt something click into place. This was what it meant to be seen. Not diminished. Not possessed. Just loved. Fully, fiercely, publicly. When they pulled apart, both laughing and crying, Dante whispered, "I wanted everyone to know. Wanted there to be no doubt that you're chosen." "I know," Isabella said, touching his face. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. For celebrating me. For loving me loudly." "Always," Dante promised. "For the rest of our lives, I'll love you loudly." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and champagne, and joy so profound it felt almost physical. Marco clapped Dante on the back, grinning. "About time, boss." Elena hugged Isabella tightly. "Welcome to the family." Judge Martinez approached with a knowing smile. "Congratulations. I expect an invitation to the wedding." "You'll get one," Dante promised. As they left the gala, hand in hand, Isabella looked out at the Portland skyline. The city lights reflecting off the river, the mountains dark against the stars. "What are you thinking?" Dante asked. "That's 6 months ago. I thought my life was over. I thought the best I could hope for was quiet survival." She looked up at him. "And now I'm engaged to a man who loves me loudly, who sees me completely, who challenges me to be braver than I ever thought possible." "You were always this brave. You just needed someone to witness it." They stood on the sidewalk outside the ballroom, traffic passing, the world continuing around them. "There's something I need to tell you," Isabella said suddenly. "What?" "I finished my book. Sent it to that agent you connected me with." Dante's eyes widened. "Isabella, that's incredible. When?" "This morning. I was too nervous to tell you before." She bit her lip. "What if it's not good enough?" "What if it's good enough? More than good enough." Dante kissed her forehead. "I'm so proud of you. I dedicated it to you. To me. To the man who taught me I was always worth seeing." She smiled through tears. "Sound familiar?" Dante pulled her close, and Isabella felt his chest shake with silent sobs. "I love you so much." "I love you too." They stood there for a long time, holding each other. Two people who'd been broken in different ways, learning to be whole together. Have you ever had someone see you when you felt invisible? Share your story in the comments below. 1 year later, Isabella stood in the back room of Chapter and Verse, adjusting her simple white dress. It wasn't a traditional wedding gown. She'd chosen something that felt more like her. Elegant but understated, beautiful but comfortable. Maya fussed with Isabella's hair, which was adorned with small white flowers. "You look perfect." "I'm nervous." "That's normal. You're about to marry a crime boss in your bookstore." Maya grinned. "This is the most you thing that's ever happened." Isabella laughed, the tension breaking. "I can't believe we're doing this here. Where else would you do it? This place is your heart." They'd kept the wedding small, 50 people, all carefully chosen. Dante's team, including Marco and Elena, Maya and a few other close friends. Judge Martinez, who'd agreed to officiate. Some of Isabella's regular customers who'd become friends. And Amber, who'd sent flowers with a note. "Thank you for showing me what strength looks like." The bookstore had been transformed. Fairy lights strung between shelves. White roses everywhere. Chairs arranged in rows facing the reading nook, where Dante would be waiting. A soft knock on the door, and Marco poked his head in. "Ready?" "Boss is getting antsy." Isabella took a deep breath. "Ready?" Maya squeezed her hand. "Let's go get you married." Dante stood in the reading nook where he'd first told Isabella about Lucia, where they'd held each other and cried and begun to heal. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, a white rose in his lapel. His hands shook slightly, the only sign of nerves. Marco stood beside him as best man. "You good?" "Never better," Dante replied. And meant it. The music started, something soft and instrumental. The guests stood, and then Isabella appeared. Dante's breath caught. She was radiant, not because of the dress or the flowers or the makeup, because she was happy, truly, deeply happy. She walked down the aisle alone. Her choice, her declaration that she was choosing this, choosing him, choosing their future together. When she reached him, Dante took her hands, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. "Hi," Isabella whispered. "Hi," Dante replied, smiling. Judge Martinez cleared her throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." The ceremony was short, personal, filled with laughter and tears. They'd written their own vows. Dante went first, his voice steady. "Isabella, you taught me that strength isn't about control. It's about trust. You taught me that being seen is worth the risk of being hurt. You taught me that love doesn't diminish, it expands." He squeezed her hands. "I promise to see you, always. To celebrate your strength." To be your partner, not your protector. To love you loudly for the rest of our lives. Isabella's turn, tears streaming down her face. Dante, you taught me that I was never forgettable. That survival could become thriving. That asking for help doesn't make me weak. It makes me brave. Her voice broke. I promise to trust you, even when it's scary. To let you love me, even when I don't feel worthy. To be your partner in all things. To choose you every day for the rest of our lives. Judge Martinez smiled. By the power vested in me by the state of Oregon, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss. Dante didn't wait for her to finish. He pulled Isabella into his arms and kissed her like she was everything, which to him she was. The bookstore erupted in applause and cheers. And as they pulled apart, both laughing and crying, Isabella looked around at the space she'd built, at the people who loved them, at the man who'd chosen to love her loudly. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, broken, invisible, convinced she was forgettable. And she thought about the woman she'd become, strong, seen, loved. Trevor had been wrong about her. Completely, devastatingly wrong. She wasn't forgettable. She never had been. She was remarkable. She was chosen. She was loved. And finally she believed it. 6 months after the wedding, Isabella sat at the signing table in Powell's City of Books, the largest independent bookstore in the world, staring at the line of people waiting to get their books signed. Her book, Seen, a memoir of survival and love. It had been published 3 months ago to unexpected acclaim. Critics praised its honesty, its refusal to simplify trauma or recovery. Readers connected with Isabella's journey from invisibility to self-acceptance. It had hit the New York Times bestseller list last week. Dante stood off to the side, trying to be inconspicuous and failing utterly. He watched Isabella with undisguised pride, occasionally taking photos with his phone. Next, please, Isabella said, smiling at a young woman who approached nervously. Hi. I just wanted to say, the woman's voice broke. I'm leaving my husband next week. I've been planning it for months, and I was so scared. But reading your book, it made me believe I could do it. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. She stood, came around the table, and hugged the woman. You can do it. You're stronger than you know. Thank you, the woman whispered. Thank you for being brave enough to tell your story. As the woman walked away clutching her signed book, Isabella met Dante's eyes across the room. He mouthed, I'm proud of you. She mouthed back, I love you. They'd bought a house together. Not Dante's sterile penthouse, but a real home in the hills overlooking Portland. They were talking about kids, maybe in a year or 2. Isabella still ran the bookstore, though she'd hired a manager to help. Dante had continued shifting his business toward legitimate ventures, though he still maintained his protection services. They were building a life together. Imperfect, complicated, real. That evening, after the signing, they drove home together. Isabella was exhausted but happy, her hand resting on Dante's thigh as he drove. How does it feel? He asked. Being a best-selling author? Surreal. Terrifying. Amazing. She smiled. Like everything else in my life these days. No regrets. Not even one. Isabella squeezed his leg. My only regret is not walking into your bookstore sooner. They pulled into their driveway as the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Inside, their home was warm and lived in. Books everywhere, of course. Photos from their wedding on the mantel. The emerald ring Dante had given her catching the light as Isabella hung up her coat. I have something for you, Dante said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. What is it? Open it. Isabella did. Inside was a deed, for the building that housed chapter and verse. Dante, what? I bought the building. It's yours. Completely, legally yours. His expression was serious. I never want you to worry about losing your sanctuary, about someone raising the rent or selling the property out from under you. It's yours, Isabella. Forever. Isabella's hands shook as she looked at the deed. The bookstore, her sanctuary, her home, was truly hers. This is too much. It's not enough. Dante took her hands. You gave me a reason to be better. You taught me that power should be used to build, not destroy. This, he gestured at the deed, is just brick and mortar. But what you've built inside those walls, the community, the safety, the hope, that's priceless. Isabella threw her arms around him, crying into his shoulder. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me, for loving me, for everything. Thank you for letting me, Dante whispered into her hair. For choosing me back. They stood in their kitchen, holding each other as the light faded outside. Two people who'd been broken learning to be whole together. And Isabella Chen, once invisible, once told she was forgettable, once convinced she was not enough, finally understood her own worth. Not because Dante had given it to her, but because he'd witnessed it, celebrated it, and loved her loudly enough that she couldn't help but see it herself. She was seen. She was chosen. She was loved. And that made all the difference. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as intriguing and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.